Hello and welcome everybody to Booze Hour Community Edition. It's been a while since I've done one of the Community Edition ones of these live streams. Folks aren't aware if this is your first time watching one of these. I actually do live streams every Monday morning with my colleague Daryl Montgomery, and we're on YouTube on that one. So youtube.com/DarylandBoo. You might be watching this from YouTube right now. If you are, you haven't subscribed already, there should be a subscribe button down there that you can press. If you're watching this from LinkedIn right now and you want to catch more of this kind of stuff, you head over to youtube.com/DarylandBoo, and then you can subscribe on there. Some of these are streamed to LinkedIn as well, though, as far as the Monday shows. And then I have a couple of things that I call Booze Hour. And I have one called Booze Hour Cloud Edition, which is a technical focus show, and we chat about things about cloud security and that kind of stuff. And then I have something called Community Edition, which is what we're doing today. So Community Edition is nothing necessarily to do with technology, but it always kind of has a tangent or a spin on technology, and it's usually somebody from our local community. We're based in Vancouver. I know we have people that are watching from everywhere, but we're in Vancouver. We have a great community of technology leaders here and folks like Michael Argast that we'll be bringing on in a second. So I like to be able to share their stories through Community Edition, but at the same time, and we did a bunch of this last year. At the same time, there's some interesting topics that we can all chat about right now, and so we'll be talking about some of that today. Now, a couple of other things that I'll mention is we do have a mailing list. If you go over to darylandboo.com, there's a mailing list on there, and you can sign up for that. And this is very good for folks that are customers of F5. Because there's a lot of technical news that comes out for F5 every week, and then we update everybody on that. But there's also other stuff that I just keep people updated generally in terms of Vancouver and in terms of the stuff going on with Daryl and myself. If you do sign up for that, you can get free stickers, and I have a few of these left from the last batch that I did. And so these are very fancy stickers that they just kind of help support the show, get the word out there, and show that you're a watcher. A couple other things I'll mention as well. This season is actually kind of supported by a couple of my community partners and friends of the show. We Hack Purple, Tanya Janka is a great friend of the show. Equinex, and Tanya will be on in a few weeks. Equinex and Terry Johal, great friend of the show as well. HashiCorp. Now, Bill Hunka from HashiCorp just moved on to a company called OpsGuru. So best of luck with him in his new role there. But HashiCorp in general is a great partner of F5 and good friend of the show as well. And then we have Okta, and I believe there was actually just an announcement on Okta and F5 from Okta's conference, new solution that we have there. I haven't read up on it yet, but something to check out. Alex Langley is our guy based in Calgary that is our Okta contact. So thank you guys for helping out with the show. And otherwise, I think this is a really cool time to have the show because, it was about last year that I started these Booze Hour sessions, and it started off as a virtual happy hour. I wrote an article about it actually on LinkedIn, so you can kind of scroll back through the timeline if you want to check that out. But that was kind of a time where we entered the pandemic and we were trying to figure out how to communicate with each other. And it seemed like people would congregate for a happy hour. So we ended up having a couple that I hosted on Zoom. And I was actually doing that daily. And then we kind of reduced it to 3 days a week. And then we actually shifted it into everything that you see now. So a YouTube channel and turning it into a newsletter and streaming every Monday morning and just kind of keeping up with folks that way. And it's just been a really cool way to connect. But and myself and Michael will talk about this is how things have gone as far as remote work. So I think it's a interesting topic to bring on. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on my guest, Michael Argast. Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Boo. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. You are one of the community leaders in Vancouver technology. Like I kind of think of, I don't want to think of like a hierarchy, but like you're one of the names that's always out there when it comes to Vancouver IT. When you talk to people at conferences, everybody knows you. So maybe for the couple folks that might not know you, maybe we can dial it back and kind of talk about, where your career started, because depending on when somebody's met you, they probably know different facets of your life, but maybe we can dial it back to however far back you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I started, in technology and security over 20 years ago, primarily in technical roles. So one of my first roles was like a help desk support role. Then I went on to be a network engineer at Sprint Canada back in the day, helping run their internet backbone and get people their first internet connections. And kind of got out of telecom after a few years, kind of bored with just faster and faster pipes, and got into security with a local company that was Active State, that was then acquired by Sophos. Ended up running the global sales engineering organization for Sophos, 120 people in 17 countries. Had my second child, didn't want to travel all over the world anymore. Joined TELUS to have something a little bit closer to home, a little bit less on the road. Worked for TELUS for 5 years, then semi-retired about 3 or 4 years ago, and then started my most recent venture through just an opportunity with some fantastic co-founders about 2 years ago. That's Cobalt, focused on small and mid-sized tech companies. And, the community has a way of keeping you humble. During last year's BC Aware event, my middle child, Zoe, ran a lock-picking table that was by far the star of the show. Probably taught 100 different adults how to pick a lock and all this kind of stuff. And so now when I introduce myself, I'm just Zoe's dad in the industry, and it's great to have some young up-and-coming talent as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is super cool. Does she have an interest in security then, or is that just kind of a...
Zoe has an interest in everything, right? So whether it's, all sorts of aspects of STEAM, science, technology, programming, cooking, baking, arts, crafts. So, I wouldn't say specifically just security, but, she has a lot of interest in a lot of activities. So.
Well, yeah, that's pretty cool. I know we had a chat about kids just before this, and it's interesting now with a lot of kids at home. You kind of get a good look at what they do during the day, because we would send our kids off to school and then they come back with a couple of things and you kind of get an idea of what's going on. But now I get like a good view of, hey, this is how my kids like to learn and their interests and stuff like that. So it sounds like your kids are into a lot of stuff, which is cool.
Yeah.
So Cobalt, let's just touch on that for a bit, so folks can learn a little bit more about Cobalt. But you have been working on this for a while, and it seems like in the past year or 2 years, it's really grown and become a really well-known company in Vancouver at this point.
Yeah, so we founded Cobalt in November of 2018, and I'd retired from TELUS kind of a year and a half before that, started an accidental lifestyle business. I like to refer to it, called Sky Northern, which is an alliance of independent consultants. Kind of was farting away at that for a while. And just before I started Cobalt, I spent like 2 months on a beach with my family in Thailand, was itchy to do a little bit of work, and then was introduced to just some fantastic co-founders. They're like, we want to get into security. We don't know anything about security. I'm like, I want to work with you, so let's figure something out. And so that was the genesis. They had no idea what they wanted to do. And for me, I've been in security for over 20 years, large, small, everything in between. And the small and mid-sized part of the market has always been dramatically underserved, in my opinion. And so, those of us who are security professionals, generally there's the upward tug in the industry because of the dollars that is involved in large enterprise, whether if you're a vendor selling to large enterprise, if you're working, that's where the jobs are. And so the SMB part of the market has been really underserved. And so year one of Cobalt, was definitely a grind, figuring things out, product market fit. We started off with kind of a SOC as a service, security monitoring as a service. And that was interesting. We had about 15 customers at the end of the first year, but it was really a hard sell. And a lot of that was for a small and mid-sized company, they don't really know what they need. They know that they need to improve their security, but they're not kind of sure what the most important thing is. And so just selling security monitoring was a really hard sell in the marketplace. And so we kind of pivoted to a full security program as a service where, we're doing end-to-end security programs, whether that's SOC 2 compliance or, another sort of program with advisory services combined with monitoring and operations. And so for a small organization that's maybe, 50 people that can't afford to hire their first full-time security person, or even if they have one, being able to give them a complete team and solution that solves their problems end to end has been really well received in the marketplace. So that coming into this year, or 2020, we had figured out a little product market fit. We were starting to hockey stick. We'd, solved all that. And then of course in March, the pandemic hits, right? And so we were, kind of a half dozen people prior to that. And I didn't know if half my customers were going to tear up their contracts and walk away because, their businesses were shut down or whatever. We did lose a couple customers, that just, their industry was really badly hit. But what happened actually was we accelerated in 2020. So we made a very intentional focus on small and mid-sized tech firms. And if you think about the shift to digital as everything went remote and distributed, a lot of our company customers just really saw a lot of benefit and growth. And so we saw a huge expansion in our health tech customer base, our B2B SaaS customer base, our fintech customer base, and exited 2020 with over 100 customers that we've worked with, a team of over 20 people distributed across Canada, and we also have a full-time team in India as well. And so we're growing like gangbusters right now, and we've definitely found a market need. So yeah, we've been really, really fortunate through some challenging times for a lot of people.
Wow, that's amazing. Not to tie it back to F5, but we've got this state of application security report, and what they do is they go through disclosures, and what they found with disclosures was that, well, first of all, they found with disclosures is a lot of reading between the lines to actually understand what happened. But they also found that there's just whole layer of companies that were just probably like what you're serving right now, that are under the radar and they don't seem like they need security, but they're getting targeted way more. And they're all the disclosures that were in the report. So many of them were just that tier there that just wasn't being addressed.
Yeah, no, and there's a couple things. Like when you get to that size where you've got enough customers and data, you're an interesting enough business, but you don't have the capacity to build an internal security competency, right? And so that's kind of a natural, they're doing all the things. They've got a cloud stack, they've got an application, they're ingesting data from their customers. And so they have a requirement to be secure, but they don't have the team, the capacity, and the budget, right? And so there's definitely a need in that market. The other thing that's definitely accelerated in the last 2 years, and it was kind of our central thesis when we came into this, is the downward pressure from the supply chain. So this is enterprise customers that go, okay, you're a health tech company and you're providing services to me. My data is with you. You've got to be secure, right? And so we're seeing a lot of that. One of the great things for us as it relates to that is in the past, security primarily focused on fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So, if you don't buy my widget, you're going to get hacked, which is, it's true, but it's a bit of ambulance chasey as it relates to sales. We tend to focus on, hey, if you want to sell to Google or RBC or one of these large organizations, you got to address the security requirements or they're just going to say no, right? So you might have the best widget on the planet, but if you can't secure your data, they're not going to be comfortable putting you in their supply chain. And so, because we can rapidly help them, build those competencies, cross that chasm, that unlocks their revenue. And so we're selling security we're a business enabler, we're helping you succeed with growth. And that's really resonated well with our customer base. Along the way, we're helping them deliver better security as well, but it's tied to their business objectives and their growth, which is really nice.
That makes total sense. I can see why you guys are getting all this success from this. Very cool. There's two things that I have seen you post about. One I've brought up before. One I'm just actually going to surprise you on, but it just struck
Yeah.
me again as we were chatting there. But the need or the challenge when it comes to people who are just coming out of school. They're looking to get into the IT security field. And then you have companies who need to hire folks and they don't necessarily have the biggest budget,
Yeah.
but they want to get good talent. And so you have this struggle and this gap in there. And I had some comments on that. And, my comments were, at the time, I was relatively lower experienced, but had a lot of ambition. And I was kind of, through chatting with somebody or my boss who became my boss, he kind of recognized that and was, gave me a shot. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, or if that is something that happens at Cobalt as well, and how you guys hire, or if you help with companies who are looking to hire talent like that.
Yeah, so there's a classic chasm that exists in the industry today that actually didn't exist as much 5 years ago. So 5 years ago, most of the people who were coming into security were coming through other fields and through other experience. So they might have been a network administrator or an IT or a sysadmin or a programmer. And so they had a base of experience that they were then pivoting into security. And so that was an easier transition for a lot of people to make. And security had less credentialing and gatekeeping. That's happening more now, unfortunately. And so what we see now is we see a lot of people coming out of these 2 and 4 year programs with limited work experience, and they're trying to get into an industry that typically wants you to have 3 to 5 years of experience before they'll take you on as the first job. So this is a natural chasm that exists. And so the question is, for these students that are coming out of these programs, how do they cross that chasm? So the first thing is focus on the right jobs, right? So if I'm a 75-person DevOps software shop, I've got budget for one security person, right? Maybe. I'm typically going to look for the person who's the all-rounder, who could do a lot of different things. And I'm going to be very reluctant to hire somebody who's junior, right? And that's just the reality of the world. Mm-hmm. And the challenge is where most people think, I go and join a company as a security person, and the company's just, they aren't prepared to take a risk on somebody who's just graduated out of school and is going to do all things because they don't have the experience, right? So they're going to try to hire more senior. Of course, they're going to run into budget issues because the more senior they want to go, they got to squeeze that into their small business budgets. And so for people who are graduating, what they need to do is they need to look at larger security shops, pick up the experience, and then they can pivot that to be a security lead in a smaller shop if that's their eventual desire, right? So this is where, working tech support at a vendor like an F5 or a Sophos or a Cisco can be a really good first job, or, working as, a security analyst in a shop that's got, a large team, right? You come in as a junior, you're maybe not being paid quite as much to start with, but you're picking up the experience of the larger organization. And so often people aren't aware of where those jobs exist. They're typically, in very large companies or in vendors, but there's good entry-level opportunities. And one of the great things about Cobalt is we're a security pure play, right? So all we do is hire security people. And so we have the ability to hire up and down the spectrum. So we have senior people, we have intermediate people, we have junior people. You need all of those to serve our clients. And so we've been able to bring in recent grads as security analysts and stuff like that, develop them up and have them grow under the tutelage of more experienced people. And so that's really helped us serve our customers well as well. But it's really hard for as somebody who's coming out of a school program to just walk into a job that has all these expectations and demands. You've got to find an entry path that actually works for you.
That makes total sense. The next thing that you posted on that maybe we can chat about here is kind of this distributed works 5 levels of autonomy. And I think this is interesting to bring up now because this article was actually written in April 10th, 2020. So it's almost exactly 1 year old. And I think what has changed since then is I remember when we first started getting sent home. I mean, I work from home and you work from home, but when people were getting sent home, it was a very novel thing for those folks working from home and being primarily based out of home and not having their desk and their comforts and maybe not even having a laptop before. And some people having to bring home their desktop and whatnot. And so there was these levels of autonomy. And I'll summarize them really quick for the folks who are who won't have a chance to read this, although I will put this, I'll put this into the comments in a second here. First level autonomy Not really remote friendly. Second level of autonomy is basically you're doing your work, but you've just shifted it to home, and it's not really a workplace that was conducive to that besides just some connectivity. And then the third level is more of an actual distributed remote first type of scenario, but still having are implementing asynchronous processes. And I think that's some of the key here. Level 4 is when you truly go asynchronous. And then level 5 is nirvana. But maybe a lot of folks are looking at this, how do I get to this level 4 set of remote work here? So, I would say myself, I'm on the sales side of things. And so we're basically measured against a quota. So we're kind of autonomous and held to that. But, did Cobalt go through this? Like, were you guys in an office before and then had to shift things, or did you already have some of these processes in place?
Yeah, so we had a physical office in Yaletown prior to the pandemic, and I had been leading distributed teams at TELUS and Sophos for most of my career, so I was comfortable with that. But some of my early co-founders were very much like, "Hey, you're a startup; you should have everybody in the same place, same physicality." And so there was an initial desire from others on the team more than myself to be physically proximate. I had done a lot prior to the pandemic, just kind of coincidentally, fortunately, to enable remote work. So we all had Zoom accounts. We had Slack as our kind of main backbone. And we also, like, for example, famously don't have a landline, right? So there's no 1-800 number that you use to call our SOC. And so we were kind of designed thinking future forward, cloud friendly as it relates to our customer base and our interactions. The team shifted to remote very well. And anytime I had an excuse pre-pandemic, oh, it's a snow day, just work from home. I would make those excuses to get people used to working remote. So when it came time to shift, the team, even though they didn't necessarily have the experience working remote, I did, they transformed really, really well. And then really what happened last year as we grew, we just grew opportunistically where we could find the best talent across Canada. And so, we naturally brought people on in Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, and, we have our team in India now. And so we have effectively become a fully distributed organization, canceled our lease, closed down our office, have no expectations to go back to a physical location anytime soon. So we're a fully distributed organization at this point, but we're a long way from nirvana as well, right? There's, I would say I'm definitely a guilty party in this, but my day has way too many meetings. And that's one of the kind of sync versus async. Like when you're in a meeting, you can't be doing other stuff, right? And so, or you're not being engaged and focused. And so getting kind of people used to working async, not having a meeting when you don't have to have a meeting, making decisions out of band, all that kind of stuff is a shift for a lot of people. And we're still working on that. And I've had those glimmers of nirvana as well along the way, right? And so probably one of my favorite stories I like to tell here is when I was leading a team at Sophos, we had 120 sales engineers around the world. And we had this little mailing list that became the backbone of communications of technical problem solving and market intelligence and stuff like this for the entire organization. So it started off being a sales engineering only thing. And then eventually we had support and product management. Everybody else wanted to get on this mailing list because they were learning so much. And we had these moments where somebody in Australia would ask a question about a problem. And over the course of 24 hours, that problem would get batted around as across the world through different time zones. And people would work on it and bring their own solutions. And so by the time a day had gone around, you had an entire global organization working on that problem to solve it for somebody in Australia out of band, right? And so those are the sorts of nirvana things that don't happen when you have everybody in an office, but you allow truly asynchronous distributed work to flourish. We're still working on that, frankly, at Cobalt, but it's certainly something that can be a rewarding part of the journey when you start to arrive.
I wonder what does the challenges come as far as expectations? Somebody sends out a Slack message and they think, well, this is an immediate way for me to send this, so I expect that somebody's going to pick this up immediately. Is there some sort of thought behind that? Or how to
I think as leaders, we need to kind of manage those expectations, right? So often I'll send out a Slack message. I sent one of these out last night, and I'm like, don't respond to this till tomorrow, right? Because you have some people who are on all the time, and you actually need to discourage them to connect. And as founders, we're always seen to be grinding and working all the time, and you don't want to like encourage people to be like constantly working, right? But the flip of that is true as well, which is you have to recognize that people have their own preferred styles, right? So I'm a morning person. I tend to get up early and work early and all this kind of stuff. And then I like to save the time from 4:35-ish to kind of when my kids are in bed to be a work-free time so that I can spend my time focused on my family. I've got a sales manager who is like, he's an evening guy, right? And so 9 o'clock at night, he finishes up his kind of personal stuff, and then he's working 9 to 1 o'clock out of band, working on proposals and other stuff with his customers. And that's okay. Like, that's his thing. I don't want to discourage him from working in a way that is most productive for him. And so you want to allow people to find their natural rhythms and time zones and all this kind of stuff and work to those as much as you can. The meeting is the one thing that kind of pulls you away from that, because if you're a morning person and you have a whole bunch of meetings in your morning and you can't get into your flow zone, then that's obviously going to break your opportunity to actually do the great work that you need to do, right? And if you're a person who likes to go to the gym in the middle of the day or go for a run, not the gym right now, or those sorts of things, having the flexibility to do that, and that's okay, is good as well, right? So it's a challenge. We're all working on it, but we designed around flexible work life all at the outset, and hopefully we're doing an okay job of maintaining it. But it's also a startup, right? So there's always a lot of activity going on.
Oh, I bet. One of the other things that can I get this back on here? One of the other things that came up in here was the notion of zero trust and Beyond Corp security model. Wondering if you've spoken to any customers around implementing something like that for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. In fact, most of our customers are much closer to a zero trust model than to a traditional, crunchy exterior, soft inside model. And again, one of the nice things about being focused on our customer base, organizations are cloud forward. So a lot of our clients look like us, right? So they're distributed teams, their data lives in the cloud. They don't have on-site premise or architecture or infrastructure. They run BYOD devices and all this kind of stuff. And so a lot of our recommendations for those clients is actually towards a zero trust model of, harden the endpoint, secure the transport layer, make sure your applications are locked down. Don't worry too much about your network infrastructure. In fact, most of my clients don't even have network infrastructure anymore. So it's really interesting when they run into security questionnaires, and the security questionnaire asks, what do you do about physical security? Well, we don't have an office. Next question, right? What are you doing about making sure that you're doing web filtering on your gateway? It's like, all our people work from home, right? Like, this is not a question that you need to be asking me. Here's the things that are really relevant. And so the nice thing is that model is, if you implement it properly, is way more secure. The deficiency I see for a lot of our organizations, our customers, is they do half of the zero trust model, but not the other half. So they do a good job of their application security, their transport layer, and they think the endpoint isn't important, right? And so the reality with zero trust is you have to secure all three, or that endpoint will become your point of compromise, and then I can get back into your cloud data, exfiltrate it all, and all this kind of stuff. And so, unfortunately, often we're educating our customers on, things like anti-malware software, encryption on your device, strong passwords. These things are just table stakes. They're basics. If you're going to adopt this model, you have to lock down your endpoint. So,
yeah, very cool comments on that. We have a couple, or we're winding down to the last minute or so here. But one thing that I still wanted to touch on, if you're okay for a couple minutes,
sure.
Is your involvement with the community has just been really inspiring in that you are, sometimes you get folks that maybe they reach a certain level, they're now an executive, and they kind of disappear. They get lost in maybe all the day-to-day things that they do. But no matter what position you're in, you seem to always be participating in part of the community. You have your kids participate in the community as well. You're giving back and you're contributing and you're speaking at events and whatnot, all seemingly without any sort of, asking for anything back. It's been really cool to see. And I'm wondering what your mindset is around that and always contributing back to the community.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I have been so fortunate in my career. I've had so many people support me and help me in my success. And, I have always believed that giving back is a core part of what everybody does. I'm mentoring this young woman at a local retailer right now, and I'm really impressed because she's growing so quickly, and she's also taking the time herself at her young age to mentor others. And it's like, this is fantastic to see. And one of the things I love about the information security community generally is, 90% of the people out there are exactly that way. Like they're going to go out of their way to help others and help them learn and share and stuff. You still get the 10% of people who are like gatekeepers and, nasties and stuff like that. But, it's one of the things that I love about this community. I'm always looking for ways to give back. It doesn't take me a lot of time and energy to go out and talk to a bunch of students and tell them how to find careers and find ways to uplift people. And for me, the most rewarding thing in my career at the end of the day is not the sales deal I won or the company I built or any of that kind of stuff. It's the people that, I've helped, guide them to the next stage of their career, and they go on to have tremendous success. And I've had a tremendous number of people in my career who have gone on to much greater heights than I have, who I was able to be a small part of their journey. And that's really, really rewarding at the end of the day. So I can't say anything other than it's a part of what I try to do. And I think it's something that, if you look back at the end of your career and say, hey, I did all these things, and one of those things is I helped a lot of people along the way, then I think, that'll be a career well spent.
Very cool. Great for you to share that, Michael. And I'm grateful that you came on as well. I knew that I wanted to have you on the second that I started doing this kind of stuff, but I wanted to have something cool to talk about, and I ran it through my head a number of times. So I'm so glad that that I was able to have you on. I think we have tons more that we could talk about. So hopefully, then the next time I run a season of this, I can have you on again for another chat.
Yeah, I'd love an opportunity to come back. And thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Just before we go, thank you again to my good friends at HashiCorp, WeHack Purple, Equinix, and Okta for helping out with the show. And I want to throw on, where is it now? This is the link that we were looking at. This is the link that we were looking at here.
I came across this site just in closing, listening to the Farnham Street blog where they podcast where they interviewed Matt Mullenweg is a great explanation of this outside of the reading. Just a great talk for people who are building distributed teams.
Okay, very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Michael. We will see everybody next week. I already have the guest lined up. Also a founder, although he just exited from the company that he founded. So that'll be interesting to see, maybe what could happen to Michael in the next couple of years, or I'm sure as long as something is interesting, you'll be working on it. So Thank you very much, folks. Look for that next week.
All right. Thanks, Boo.
Bye for now.
Bye.